Did you know that an empire destined to last 1,000 years began with a single man, a spear, and a vision? You can almost feel the salty air on your face, the same breeze that ruffled the purple cloak of Emperor Constantine the Great. He stands on a windswept hill, looking out over a small ancient Greek town called Byzantium. It's a respectable place, sure, but not the center of the world. Not yet. Below him, the Golden Horn curves like a sickle, and the deep blue waters of the Bosphorus Strait separate Europe from Asia. It is here, at the literal crossroads of the known world, that he will build his new capital, a city to rival and eventually eclipse Rome itself. His advisors are probably nervous. This is a construction project to make all others look like a garden shed renovation. Before you get too comfortable, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel to encourage me to make more content like this. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights and let's begin tonight's journey. You are there, in the year 324. The air buzzes not just with sea gnats, but with revolutionary energy. You watch as Constantine, guided by what he claims was a divine command, takes his spear and begins to trace the city's future walls in the soil. He just keeps walking, and his followers grow concerned by the immense scale of his outline. When they ask him how much further he will go, he simply replies, "I shall continue until he who walks before me stops." There are no zoning permits, no community feedback meetings, just an emperor with a direct line to the divine architect. He is not just planning a city, he is consecrating a new world order. The old Rome, steeped in centuries of pagan tradition and political backstabbing, feels tainted, obsolete. This new city, Constantinople, will be different. It will be a Christian capital for a Christian empire. As you walk through the construction site, you see the past and future colliding. Masons chip away at marble quarried from across the sea, while nearby, teams of workers carefully dismantle ancient temples from Greece, Egypt, and Asia Minor. The finest statues, columns, and monuments of the pagan world are being shipped here, not to be worshipped, but to be repurposed as decoration. It's the ultimate act of cultural appropriation. You see the famous Serpent Column, a bronze monument dedicated by 31 Greek city-states to Apollo at Delphi after their victory over the Persians, now being set up in the grand new Hippodrome. It's a pagan trophy in a Christian stadium. This blending of worlds is everywhere. Great avenues are laid out, wider and more magnificent than any in old Rome. Aqueducts snake across the countryside to bring fresh water, and massive cisterns are dug beneath the ground. At its heart, the city is a paradox, a Christian capital built with the bones of a pagan past. The emperor's own religious conviction is the subject of quiet whispers. Historians still debate whether his conversion was a moment of genuine faith, a masterful political calculation, or some combination of both. Whatever the truth, the consequences of his actions are undeniable. He has hitched the fortunes of the Roman Empire to a new and powerful faith. You can see the foundations of great churches being laid, their domes imagined to one day pierce the skyline. The most important of these will be the Hagia Irene, the Church of Holy Peace, the city's first cathedral. It is a symbol of the new era. The official dedication of the city happens in 330, and it is named Nova Roma or New Rome. But everyone, from the senators to the dockworkers, calls it Constantinople, the city of Constantine. It is a testament to one man's immense ambition and the power of an idea whose time had come. The center of gravity for the Western world has just shifted, and the ground beneath your feet feels forever changed. The magnificent city rises from the earth, its marble gleaming in the sun. But a structure is only as strong as its foundation, and the foundation of this new Christian empire is cracking. You soon realize that building a capital is one thing, but unifying a faith is another entirely. The debates are not happening in dusty libraries. They are raging in the marketplaces, on the docks, and in the army barracks. The central question is a profound one that shakes the very core of the new religion. Who exactly was Jesus? Was he a man, a divine being, or something in between? One charismatic priest from Alexandria, named Arius, has a compelling and popular answer. He argues that if God the Father created everything, then he must have also created the Son. This means the Son is a created being, subordinate to the Father, not co-eternal, and not of the same divine substance. This idea spreads like wildfire. It is logical, easy to grasp, and deeply unsettling to the established church hierarchy. You find yourself transported a short distance away from the new capital, to the city of Nicaea, in the year 325. The air is thick with anticipation. Constantine, the master political operator, understands that an empire divided by faith cannot stand. He has summoned over 300 bishops from every corner of his realm for an unprecedented gathering. The First Ecumenical Council. You see them arriving, a living tapestry of the Christian world. There are learned scholars from Antioch, austere monks from the Egyptian desert, and bishops from as far away as Persia and Gaul. Many of them bear the physical scars of the Great Persecution, which ended just over a decade ago. You see men with empty eye sockets, with hands crippled by fire, with backs scarred by whips. For them, this is not an abstract theological debate. They have bled for their faith, and they will not see it torn apart by internal division. You slip into the great hall of the imperial palace, the scent of incense and old parchment hanging in the air. Constantine himself enters, dressed not in military armor, but in resplendent purple and gold robes, adorned with pearls. He is not here to dictate theology. He is here as the convener, the guarantor of order. Historians still debate whether his primary motivation was a genuine desire for theological truth or a pragmatic need for political unity. Perhaps he understood that the two were now inseparable. The debates begin, and the passion is overwhelming. You listen to the eloquent Greek, the arguments flying back and forth, citing scripture, philosophy, and sacred tradition. Arius defends his position with skillful rhetoric, but he is met with a wall of opposition led by a fiery young deacon from Alexandria named Athanasius. The core of their argument hinges on a single Greek letter. Arius supports the term homoiousios, meaning of similar substance, while Athanasius champions homoousios, meaning of the same substance. One little iota, the smallest letter in the Greek alphabet, represents the gulf between Jesus being godlike and Jesus being God. The tension is so high that legends are born in the heat of the moment. You hear whispers and gasps ripple through the assembly. A story, likely embellished over time, claims that the kindly bishop Nicholas of Myra, the man who would one day evolve into the legend of Santa Claus, became so enraged by Arius's arguments that he walked across the room and struck him squarely in the face. It's a shocking image, but it perfectly captures the raw, unfiltered passion of men who believed the fate of every human soul was hanging in the balance. In the end, Constantine pushes for a consensus. The council overwhelmingly rejects Arius and sides with Athanasius. They draft a statement of faith, a creed that will become the bedrock of Christian orthodoxy for the next 1700 years. It declares that the Son is of the same substance as the Father. With this act, the Roman state and the Christian Church are officially fused. Religious dissent is now a political crime. The empire has a new capital, and now it has a new, unified, and imperially enforced creed. 2 centuries have passed. The city of Constantine is now a sprawling, magnificent metropolis, the undisputed queen of cities. You walk its colonnaded streets, but the air is different. It's charged with a relentless, almost manic energy that emanates from the great palace itself. This is the age of Justinian, an emperor who, it is said, never sleeps. You imagine him in his study, a single candle flickering as he pores over architectural plans, legal texts, and military reports. His mind constantly working, constantly planning. He is a man of humble origins, but his ambition is anything but. He dreams a dream so vast it borders on madness, to restore the Roman Empire to its full former glory, to reunite the sundered halves, east and west. His wife, Theodora, a woman of equally sharp intellect and controversial past, is his constant partner in this grand endeavor. His reign, however, is nearly extinguished before it truly begins. You find yourself in the heart of the city, the Hippodrome, a colossal stadium that can hold 100,000 people. The roar of the crowd is deafening. The chariot races are more than sport. They are a proxy for political and social rivalries, embodied by the two main factions, the Blues and the Greens. In 532, these rivalries explode. A protest over the arrest of some of their members escalates into a full-blown insurrection, the infamous Nika riots. The crowd, now a unified mob shouting Nika or conquer, sets the city ablaze. For 5 days, Constantinople burns. You see smoke billow from the Senate House and from the city's main cathedral, the second Hagia Sophia. Justinian, trapped in the palace, prepares to flee. It is Theodora who famously shames him into staying, declaring that the royal purple is the noblest shroud. Inspired, Justinian unleashes his brilliant general, Belisarius, who herds the rioters into the Hippodrome and massacres them. Tens of thousands die, but the throne is saved. From the ashes of this destruction, Justinian's grand vision rises. He will not just rebuild the great church, he will create a monument so spectacular it will be the wonder of the Christian world. You watch as 10,000 workers, guided by the brilliant mathematicians Antimaeus of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus, begin construction. They work at a furious pace, using materials from across the empire. There are green marble columns from Thessaly, porphyry from Egypt, and yellow stone from Syria. The result, completed in less than 6 years, is the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. You step inside, and your breath catches in your throat. Above you, a gigantic dome, seeming to float on a cascade of light from 40 arched windows, rises to an impossible height. The interior is bathed in a golden glow, reflecting off acres of intricate mosaics. On the day of its dedication, you watch Justinian walk to the pulpit, arms outstretched, and declare, "Solomon, I have outdone thee." At the same time, his armies are on the march. Belisarius leads campaigns that are as audacious as the emperor's building projects. You follow their progress on maps in the palace. North Africa is reclaimed from the Vandals in a stunningly quick campaign. Then comes the long, brutal slog to reconquer Italy from the For a moment, it seems the dream is within reach. But just as Justinian's empire reaches its greatest extent, a new enemy arrives, one that his legions cannot fight. It is silent, invisible, and utterly devastating. It arrives on grain ships from Egypt, carried by the fleas on rats. It is the bubonic plague. The year is 541, and the dream turns into a nightmare. You see the city transformed. The streets, once bustling, grow quiet. Carts piled high with bodies creak through the alleys. At its peak, 10,000 people are dying every day. There is no more room in the cemeteries, so bodies are stacked in fortified towers, their stench hanging over the city like a shroud. Justinian himself falls ill, but miraculously recovers. His empire, however, will not. The plague shatters his armies, empties his treasury, and halts his conquests. Historians still debate whether his wars fatally overstretched the empire's resources, but the plague delivered a blow from which it would never fully recover. The emperor who never sleeps has been forced to awaken to a grim new reality, while Justinian, the emperor who never sleeps, dreams of reclaiming lost territory. The woman beside him is shaping the very soul of the empire. You are now within the gilded walls of the great palace, a labyrinth of mosaic-covered halls and silent, watchful courtiers. Here, power is not always loud. Sometimes it is a whispered suggestion, a knowing glance, and no one's glance holds more weight than that of Empress Theodora. Her story does not begin in a palace, but on the dusty, raucous floor of the Hippodrome. She was the daughter of a bearkeeper for the Green faction, and she herself became an actress and entertainer. In the rigid social hierarchy of the time, this was a profession of the lowest order, associated with scandalous behavior and moral laxity. You can almost hear the scandalized whispers that must have followed her when Justinian, then heir to the throne, fell deeply in love with her. He was so determined to marry her that he had the laws changed, laws that forbade a senator from marrying an actress. A court historian named Procopius, in a book that would only be published after his death, called The Secret History, painted a lurid picture of her youth, describing comedic stage acts of a particularly shocking nature. This account has colored her reputation for centuries. Yet, as you observe her now, gliding through the imperial chambers, it is impossible to reconcile that image with the woman before you. Historians still debate whether Procopius's account is a factual expose or the vindictive slander of a disgruntled courtier who resented her power. Was she a manipulative seductress, or a brilliant woman who overcame a sordid past through sheer force of will? The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the middle. But the woman you see now, co-ruler of the Roman world, is a different creature entirely. You remember her courage during the Nika riots, her voice ringing with defiance, shaming an emperor and his generals into action. She is not merely Justinian's wife, she is his most trusted advisor, his intellectual equal, his partner in power. She uses this power with precision to champion the cause of the most vulnerable, particularly women. Perhaps drawing from her own difficult past, she pushes for legislation that is revolutionary for its time. You see edicts being issued that make it illegal to force women into prostitution. She establishes a convent, the Metanoia, as a safe house for former sex workers, a place of refuge and dignity. Laws are passed granting women more rights in divorce, more power over their own property, and greater inheritance rights. For the first time, the rape of a woman is made a capital offense, with the guilty party's property being transferred to the victim. She is a social reformer in an age of conquerors. Her battleground, the legal code itself. This passion for justice extends to a project that is, if anything, even more ambitious than building the Hagia Sophia. It is the complete overhaul of Roman law. For nearly 1,000 years, Roman law has been accumulating. It is a chaotic mountain of decrees, senatorial opinions, and rulings by magistrates, often contradictory and spread across thousands of scrolls. Imagine trying to settle a modern contract dispute using every version of a company's terms and conditions from the last 50 years, all at once. It was an unworkable mess. Justinian, with Theodora's firm support, commissions a brilliant legal scholar named Tribonian to lead a team with a monumental task: to read everything, to sift, sort, and systematize a millennium of jurisprudence into a single, coherent body of law. They are legal archaeologists, excavating a mountain of forgotten rulings to build a new foundation for a Christian empire. The result is the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. It consists of the Code, a collection of all valid imperial laws, the Digest, a summary of the greatest legal opinions of the past, and the Institutes, a textbook for law students. From a stage performer whom the old laws barely recognized as a person, Theodora became an architect of a legal system that would influence the world for 1,000 years, forming the very bedrock of modern European law. The laws of Justinian and Theodora have been etched into the foundation of the empire. But a strong legal code is no defense against a new and terrifying force sweeping out of the south. More than a century has passed. The world has changed. The dream of a reunited Roman Empire is a distant memory, replaced by a desperate fight for survival. A new faith, Islam, has exploded out of the Arabian Peninsula, and its armies, fueled by a fervent belief and brilliant military tactics, have conquered vast swathes of the Byzantine Empire, including the Holy Land of Syria. Palestine and Egypt. Now, they are at the gates of the capital itself. You stand on the immense Theodosian walls, the same walls that have protected the city for centuries, and you feel a profound sense of dread. Below you, stretching as far as the eye can see, is the army of the Umayyad Caliphate, led by the skilled general Maslama. It is the year 717, and this is not a raid. It is a full-scale war of extermination. The enemy's fleet is a forest of masts on the Sea of Marmara. They number over 1,000 ships, a naval armada of unprecedented size. Their plan is simple: to blockade the city by sea and starve it out by land. You watch as the defenders stretch the great chain across the mouth of the Golden Horn, a massive iron link barrier that prevents the enemy ships from entering the city's primary harbor. It is a formidable defense, but as the months drag on, despair begins to set in. The blockade is total. Food becomes scarce. A brutally harsh winter descends, covering the ground in snow for over 100 days. The besieging army suffers terribly, with soldiers freezing in their tents and their horses and camels dying by the thousands. But inside the city, the situation is just as grim. You see the haunted look in people's eyes, the gnawing hunger that saps their strength and their hope. It seems only a matter of time before the city falls. But the Byzantines have a secret. It is a weapon so terrifying, so effective, that its formula is the most closely guarded state secret in the empire, known only to the emperor and a handful of trusted technicians. You are taken to a special squadron of Byzantine warships called dromongs. They are smaller and faster than the bulky enemy vessels. On their prows, you see strange bronze devices, shaped like lions' heads or other beasts, with nozzles pointing forward. Below decks, men are working a complex system of pumps and siphons. The air is thick with the acrid smell of sulfur and naphtha. This is the delivery system for the Empire's miracle weapon, a liquid incendiary known to its enemies as Greek fire. The order is given. The Byzantine ships sail out to meet the enemy. The Arab commanders, confident in their superior numbers, see this as a desperate, foolish gesture. Then, the siphons are activated. From the bronze nozzles erupts a thick, hissing stream of liquid flame. It is a horrifying sight, a torrent of fire that cannot be extinguished with water. In fact, water seems only to make it burn more fiercely. You watch in awe and terror as the fire clings to the wooden hulls of the enemy ships, to their sails, to their rigging, and to the men themselves. The sea itself seems to burn. The roar of the flames is matched only by the screams of the dying. The psychological effect is even more devastating than the physical destruction. This is not normal fire. It seems like a demonic force, a hellish substance unleashed upon the world. The enemy fleet is thrown into chaos, consumed by an inferno of the empire's own making. The inventor was said to be a Syrian Christian refugee named Kallinikos of Heliopolis, who brought the formula to Constantinople a generation earlier. Historians and chemists still debate its exact composition, with theories ranging from a mixture of naphtha, quicklime, and sulfur to various combinations of pine, resin, and saltpeter. Whatever its makeup, it saved the city. The shattered remnants of the Arab fleet eventually withdrew, and the land army, ravaged by the winter and disease, lifted the siege. Constantinople, and with it, Christian Europe, had been saved by fire. The fires of the Arab siege have cooled, but a new, more insidious fire now begins to burn within the empire's soul. It is a fire of ideas, a conflict not over land or treasure, but over the very nature of worship. You find yourself in a quiet, candlelit church, the air heavy with the sweet scent of beeswax and incense. All around you, the walls glitter with mosaics. The faces of saints, rendered in shimmering gold and colored glass, gaze down with solemn, eternal expressions. On a nearby wall hangs a wooden panel, an icon of the Virgin Mary holding the Christ child. An old woman approaches it, her face a roadmap of worry and devotion. She touches the painted surface, kisses it, and whispers a prayer. For her, And for millions like her, this is not just a painting. It is a window to the divine, a physical point of contact with the holy. These images are protectors, intercessors, and members of the family. Now, you are in the presence of the emperor who saved the city, Leo III. He is a soldier, a pragmatist, a man from the eastern provinces where the influence of Islam, a faith that strictly forbids religious imagery, is much stronger. He looks at the same icons and sees something different. He sees a violation of the second commandment, "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image." He sees idolatry in the wake of a recent, massive, volcanic eruption in the Aegean Sea. He becomes convinced that the empire's recent misfortunes, the sieges, the plagues, are a sign of God's wrath. And the cause of that wrath, he believes, is the worship of images. Historians still debate whether Leo's motives were born of pure theological zeal, a reaction to the aniconic success of Islam, or if it was a calculated political move to weaken the immense power and wealth of the monasteries, who were the primary producers and beneficiaries of the icon trade. The flashpoint comes in the year 726. The emperor orders the removal of the most prominent icon in the entire city, a magnificent image of Christ known as the Christ Chalkites, which stood over the main ceremonial entrance to the Great Palace, the Chalk Gate. You are in the crowd that gathers as a soldier climbs a ladder, an axe in his hand, to pry the holy image from the wall. A collective gasp of horror ripples through the onlookers. This is not just a redecoration, it is a sacrilege, a public execution of a sacred symbol. The crowd, composed mostly of devout women, erupts in fury. According to tradition, a group of them, led by a woman later canonized as Saint Theodosia, rush forward, topple the ladder, and beat the soldier to death. The revolt is brutally suppressed, and Theodosia is executed, becoming the first martyr for the cause of icons. The line has been drawn. The empire is now split into two warring factions, the iconoclasts, or image breakers, who support the emperor, and the iconodules, or image venerators, who resist. This is not a polite theological discussion, it is a vicious, internal war that tears society apart. You see imperial agents entering churches and monasteries, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent halls. They whitewash over priceless mosaics, transforming vibrant scenes of salvation history into sterile, blank walls. They pry icons from their mountings and throw them onto massive bonfires, the smell of burning paint and ancient wood filling the air. Monks, the most stalwart defenders of the icons, are arrested, tortured, and exiled. The argument moves from the palace to the dinner table. Neighbor turns against neighbor, son against father. It is a culture war fought with axes and whitewash, a struggle for the very soul of Byzantium. The hero who saved the city from a foreign enemy has now plunged it into a war against itself. The long, bitter war over images finally ends. You stand in the great cathedral of Hagia Sophia on the first Sunday of Lent in the year 843. The Empress Theodora, not the same one from Justinian's time, but a later regent for her young son, has decreed the final restoration of the icons. A solemn procession of clergy enters the church, holding aloft the newly restored images. The walls, once stark and white, are beginning to gleam again with the faces of saints. A wave of profound relief and collective joy washes over the city. This day will be remembered forever as the triumph of orthodoxy. The empire, having torn itself apart for over a century, is finally whole again. This newfound unity ushers in a golden age, a period of such cultural brilliance and military might that it will be known as the Macedonian Renaissance. The dynasty that presides over this revival, however, has origins that are anything but golden. Its founder is a man named Basil, and his story is so improbable it feels like a folktale. You see him first, not in a palace, but in a stable. He is a peasant, an Armenian horse-tamer of immense physical strength. He arrives in Constantinople as a penniless adventurer with nothing but the clothes on his back. His big break comes when he tames a wild horse that no one else can handle, a feat that catches the eye of a nobleman and eventually the emperor himself, Michael III. The emperor, known to history as Michael the Drunkard, is a decadent and erratic ruler, more interested in chariot racing and lavish parties than in governing. He is captivated by Basil's strength and charisma, and the two men become inseparable friends and drinking companions. You watch as Basil's ascent becomes a whirlwind of court intrigue. He rises from stable boy to the emperor's chief bodyguard, then to the high chamberlain. Michael showers him with wealth and titles, even forcing Basil to divorce his peasant wife and marry the emperor's own mistress. The relationship is a strange and toxic mix of genuine affection and ruthless ambition. Basil becomes co-emperor, the peasant now adorned in the imperial purple, standing beside the man who raised him from nothing. But for a man like Basil, sharing power is not enough. In a chilling act of betrayal, Basil arranges for Michael's assassination. You are a silent witness in the emperor's bedchamber as Basil's men burst in and cut down the drunken, defenseless Michael. Basil I, the horse tamer, is now the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. Despite its bloody beginning, his reign marks the start of a remarkable recovery. The empire is no longer just desperately defending its borders, it is expanding them. The armies are reorganized and retrained, and they begin to push back the Arabs in the east, reclaiming long-lost territory. This renewed military confidence is matched by an explosion of art and learning. You walk through the workshops and scriptoriums of the city, and you see a deliberate, passionate effort to revive the glories of the classical past. Scholars like the brilliant patriarch Photios lead a massive project to collect, copy, and comment on the works of ancient Greek writers, philosophers, and scientists, preserving a legacy that might otherwise have been lost. It's like a state-sponsored mission to create the world's most magnificent library. Artists, free from the constraints of iconoclasm, create breathtaking new mosaics. The style is different now, more naturalistic, more emotional, drawing inspiration directly from classical models. You see Christ depicted not just as a stern judge, but with a palpable humanity, and the Virgin Mary with a gentle, maternal sorrow. Historians still debate whether this was a true Renaissance, a rebirth of ideas like the one that would later sweep through Italy, or simply the highest peak in an unbroken cultural tradition. But as you look up at the glittering mosaics and watch scholars painstakingly transcribing Plato, it feels like the empire is remembering who it is, reclaiming its heritage, and forging a new, confident identity in a world of purple and gold. The golden age of art and learning, born from the triumph of orthodoxy, now gives way to an age of iron and blood. The Macedonian dynasty continues, but its new emperor is a man forged in a different fire. You now stand in the presence of Basil II, great-grandson of the dynasty's founder. There is no hint of the peasant horse-tamer's rough charm in this man. There is only a cold, unyielding intensity. You look at him, and you do not see a patron of the arts or a student of philosophy. You see a soldier. He is short, powerfully built, with piercing light blue eyes that seem to miss nothing. He is ascetic, almost monkish in his habits. He shuns the lavish ceremonies of the court, wears simple, dark military tunics instead of silk and gold, and eats the same plain food as his soldiers. He is the ultimate nonsense CEO of a military superpower, and his company's sole business is war. His entire reign is dominated by a single, obsessive goal: the complete and total subjugation of the Bulgarian Empire to the north. For centuries, the Bulgarians have been a thorn in Byzantium's side, a powerful and ambitious rival kingdom. Their Tsar, a formidable warrior named Samuel, has carved out a vast empire in the Balkans, and Basil is determined to destroy it. This is not a war of single, glorious battles. It is a grim, grinding conflict that lasts for nearly 40 years. You are there, year after year, marching with Basil and his armies. He is not an emperor who directs wars from a gilded palace room. He leads from the front, sharing every hardship with his men. You feel the biting winter winds in the Balkan mountains, the sucking mud of the spring thaws, the suffocating heat of summer. It is a relentless seasonal rhythm of campaigning, a slow, methodical constriction of the enemy. Basil's army is a fearsome and multicultural machine. At its core is the togmata, the elite professional troops of the central army, but his personal bodyguard is a sight to behold. They are the Varangian Guard, an elite corps of 6,000 axe-wielding mercenaries, mostly towering Norsemen and Rus from the lands of modern-day Sweden and Ukraine. Fiercely loyal as long as the gold flows, they are his personal enforcers, a terrifying wall of steel and muscle that surrounds him in battle. An eccentric curiosity of his reign is that Basil never married or had children, a complete break from imperial tradition. His only bride, it was said, was the empire itself. He poured all his energy, all his focus, into the state. The brutal climax of this long war comes in the year 1014 at the Battle of Claudion. Basil's army manages to encircle the main Bulgarian force in a mountain pass. The victory is absolute. But what Basil does next is what cements his name in history with a chilling epithet. He takes nearly 15,000 Bulgarian prisoners. He then orders them all to be blinded. You watch in disbelief as this horrific, systematic punishment is carried out. The emperor's orders are precise. For every 100 men blinded, one man is to be left with a single eye, so that he can lead the others home. Imagine the scene, a shuffling, stumbling procession of thousands of sightless men, a river of human misery snaking its way back through the mountains to their Tsar. When Tsar Samuel sees what is left of his army, he suffers a massive stroke and dies 2 days later. The Bulgarian state, its spirit broken, collapses soon after. The Danube River is once again the empire's northern frontier. Historians still debate whether Basil's brutal tactics were a necessary evil to end a generations-long threat, or a catastrophic overreach that poisoned the region with a legacy of hatred. With his victory, the Byzantine Empire reaches its greatest territorial extent in 4 centuries. The treasury is overflowing, the borders are secure, and Basil II, now known forever as Bulgar-Octus, the Bulgar-Slayer, stands as the most powerful man in the Christian world. The empire of the Bulgar-Slayer is at its zenith. The treasury is full, the borders are secure, and the emperor's authority is absolute. But as you stand in the seemingly invincible capital, you sense that the most dangerous fractures are not on the frontiers, but at the very heart of the Christian family. For centuries, a slow, quiet separation has been happening between the Greek-speaking East and the Latin-speaking West. It is not a sudden break, but a gradual drifting apart, like 2 continental plates grinding against each other, building pressure until an earthquake becomes inevitable. This is a family dispute that has been simmering for generations, and the pot is about to boil over. You feel the cultural gulf widening with every passing year. In Constantinople, they read the Church Fathers in their original Greek, they follow ancient traditions, and they look upon the Westerners, with their Frankish kings and their strange customs, as semi-barbaric. In Rome, they speak Latin. They are forging a new identity from the ashes of the old Western Empire, and they look upon the Byzantines as effete, overly intellectual, and stubbornly insubordinate. The list of grievances is long and, to an outsider, almost comically petty. You hear heated arguments over whether priests should be bearded, as was the custom in the East, or clean-shaven, as was becoming the norm in the West. There is a fierce debate over a seemingly minor detail of ritual. Should the bread used for the Eucharist be leavened, rising like Christ from the tomb, as the East insisted, or unleavened, like the bread of the Last Supper, as the West now mandated? It is the theological equivalent of arguing over holiday traditions, but with the eternal salvation of mankind believed to be at stake. But beneath these surface-level squabbles lie 2 fundamental, irreconcilable differences. The first is a single Latin word, filioque, meaning "and the Son." The original Nicene Creed, the foundational text agreed upon by the whole Church centuries ago, stated that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father. The Western Church, at some point, had added "and the Son" to their version of the Creed. To the West, this was a logical clarification. To the East, it was an outrageous, unilateral alteration of a sacred and universally agreed-upon formula, a forgery at the heart of the faith. The second, and far more significant issue, was power. The Pope in Rome, citing his succession from the Apostle Peter, was increasingly asserting his claim to be the supreme head of the entire Christian Church, with universal jurisdiction over all other bishops. The Patriarch of Constantinople, however, saw the Pope as merely the first among equals, one of 5 major patriarchs governing the Church collegially. It was a clash between monarchy and aristocracy. The breaking point arrives in 1054. The two men at the center of the storm are perfect mirrors of each other's intransigence. In Constantinople, there is the powerful and ambitious patriarch Michael Kerolarios. In Rome, there is the zealous reformer Pope Leo IX, represented in Constantinople by his legate, the rigid and tactless Cardinal Humbert. The negotiations, predictably, are a disaster, a clash of two colossal egos. Finally, on a hot July afternoon, Humbert has had enough. You are in the Hagia Sophia, the great church packed with worshippers for the afternoon liturgy. The air is still and heavy with the scent of incense. Suddenly, Cardinal Humbert and his fellow legates stride through the massive bronze doors, push their way through the stunned congregation, and walk directly to the high altar. In a gesture of supreme contempt, Humbert slaps down a papal bull, a scroll of parchment containing a formal decree. It excommunicates Patriarch Keralios and his followers. He then turns, brushes the dust from his feet as a sign of shaking off a cursed place, and storms out of the church. The divorce papers have been served, in the most public and insulting way imaginable. In response, a furious Kerolarios convenes a council of his own and promptly excommunicates Humbert and the papal mission. Historians still debate the true significance of this moment. Was it the cause of the split, or just the official death certificate for a relationship that had been ailing for centuries? At the time, it likely felt to many like just another spat, but this time, the wounds would not heal. The mutual anathemas would stick, hardening the division until it became a permanent chasm. The one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church was now irrevocably broken in two. The great family of Christendom has split down the middle, a wound that will never truly heal. But inside the glittering walls of Constantinople, the immediate concerns are far more tangible. The strong, ascetic hand of Basil the Bulgar-Slayer has been gone for nearly 50 years. The iron will that held the empire together has been replaced by a succession of weak, inept, or simply uninterested rulers. The overflowing treasury has been squandered on court luxuries and political favors. The powerful, hardened provincial army has been neglected, its funding diverted by a jealous civil aristocracy in the capital who feared a popular general more than any foreign enemy. The empire is a magnificent, hollowed-out tree, its golden bark hiding the rot within. And now, a new power is rising in the east, a storm gathering on the horizon. They are the Seljuk Turks, recent converts to Islam, and they are not like the Arabs of old. They are a force of nature, a whirlwind of horse and arrow that has swept across Persia and now pushes relentlessly into the Byzantine frontier province of Armenia. You see a new emperor on the throne, Romanos for Diogenes. He is a man cut from the old cloth, a soldier who married an empress to gain power, and he is determined to be another Basil II. He sees the Seljuk threat for what it is, and resolves to meet it with overwhelming force. He gathers a colossal army, perhaps as many as 70,000 men. You stand on the plains of Anatolia and watch them assemble, a truly staggering sight. There are the elite Byzantine heavy cavalry, gleaming in their steel armor. There are the Varangian guards, a solid core of axe-wielding giants. But there are also thousands of mercenaries from every corner of the known world. Normans and Franks from the west, and, crucially, large contingents of Turkic horsemen, Pechenegs, and Oghuz, hired to fight their own kinsmen. It is less a cohesive army and more a multinational corporation held together by a single, ambitious CEO. The year is 1071. The two armies meet on a vast, dusty plain near the town of Manzikert. The Seljuk Sultan, a brilliant commander named Alp Arslan, is actually more concerned with his southern border and the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt. He even offers Romanos a peace treaty, which the overconfident emperor arrogantly rejects. The battle begins. The Seljuks employ their classic steppe tactics, refusing to engage in a pitched battle. Their horse archers swarm around the slower, heavily armored Byzantines, firing volley after volley of arrows, then retreating before a charge can reach them. They are like deadly insects, stinging and vanishing, impossible to swat. For hours, Romanos and his army are drawn further and further into the plain, growing tired, frustrated, and thirsty under the hot August sun. As dusk begins to fall, Romanos, realizing he cannot force a decisive engagement, orders a disciplined withdrawal back to his fortified camp. And it is in this moment that disaster strikes. In the noise and confusion, the order is misinterpreted by some. At the same time, the Turkic mercenaries in the Byzantine army, seeing the familiar banners of their Seljuk cousins, decide to switch allegiances, but the most fatal blow comes from within. The rear guard, commanded by Andronicus Doukas, a member of a powerful family with a bitter political rivalry against Romanos, suddenly turns and marches away from the battle. You see the banners of the reserves moving not to support the main line, but to abandon it. Whether it was a deliberate act of treason or a catastrophic misjudgment is a question historians still debate, but the effect is the same. The emperor's army is suddenly exposed, its retreat cut off. Alp Arslan seizes the opportunity and launches an Ots assault. The Byzantine line collapses into chaos. The emperor himself, his horse shot out from under him, is surrounded. His loyal Varangians fight to the last man around him, but he is wounded, and for the first time in Byzantine history, a Roman emperor is taken captive on the field of battle. The battle itself was a terrible defeat, but what followed was the true catastrophe. Romanos, brought before Alp Arslan, was treated with surprising respect. After a symbolic gesture of humiliation, the two rulers negotiated a lenient treaty, but when Romanos was released, he returned to an empire that had already declared him deposed. His rivals, the Doukas family, had seized the throne. A vicious civil war erupted, pitting what was left of the Byzantine armies against each other. It was this internal conflict that shattered the empire's defenses. While Byzantium tore itself apart, the Seljuk tribes poured into the Anatolian heartland, no longer as raiders, but as settlers. The gates to the heartland, locked for centuries, had just been kicked wide open. The disaster at Manzikert was not a single, fatal wound. It was the beginning of a slow, agonizing hemorrhage. Decades have passed, and the empire you now see is a shadow of its former self. You stand on a hill overlooking the Bosphorus, gazing across the water to the Asian shore. That land, Anatolia, the empire's traditional heartland and primary source of soldiers and grain, is almost entirely lost. It is now home to a new Seljuk state, the Sultanate of Rum. The empire is an amputee, a torso without its limbs, clinging desperately to the Balkans and the coastal fringes of its old territories. The civil wars that followed the battle bled the state of its last reserves of manpower and money. It is a time of profound crisis, a crisis that calls for a leader of extraordinary cunning and resilience. That leader emerges in the form of Alexios I Komnenos. He is not a hereditary emperor born in the purple. He is a brilliant general and a masterful politician who seized the throne in a palace coup. You observe him in his council chambers, and you see a man burdened by the weight of a dying empire. He is handsome, charismatic, but his eyes reveal a mind that is constantly calculating, constantly weighing threats and opportunities. He inherits an empire that is bankrupt, its armies shattered, facing enemies on all sides. In the west, the Norman adventurer Robert Guiscard is carving up Byzantine Italy and even dreams of conquering Constantinople itself. In the north, the Pecheneg horsemen raid with impunity right up to the city walls. And in the east, the Turks are a constant, menacing presence. Alexios is a master of improvisation. He debases the currency to pay his troops, melts down church treasures to fund his wars, and plays his enemies against each other with breathtaking skill. He manages to drive back the Normans and annihilate the Pechenegs. But the problem of the Turks remains. He simply does not have the manpower to reconquer Anatolia. And so, he makes a fateful decision, a decision that will change the course of history. He decides to turn to the west. He will appeal to the Pope, the same institution his predecessors had so dramatically split from just over a century before, and ask for help. But he is very specific in what he asks for. You read the letters he sends to Pope Urban II. He is not asking for a great holy war or a mass migration. He is requesting a manageable force of elite Western knights, mercenaries who will fight for Byzantine gold and under his command. He imagines a disciplined contingent of Frankish heavy cavalry, a useful supplement to his own lighter armed forces. You are now at the Council of Clermont in France. In the year 1095, you stand in a field packed with thousands of knights, nobles, and commoners, their breath misting in the cold November air. Pope Urban II stands on a high platform, and he begins to speak. He reads Alexius's plea for aid, describing the suffering of the Eastern Christians and the desecration of the holy places. But then, he pivots. He is a brilliant orator, and he taps into a deep well of religious fervor, frustration, and ambition in Western Europe. He is not just recruiting mercenaries for a foreign emperor. He is launching a new, grand enterprise. This will not be a war for hire, he declares, but a pilgrimage, an armed pilgrimage, to liberate Jerusalem itself. He speaks of a land of milk and honey, of absolution for all sins for those who take up the cross. A cry ripples through the crowd, a single, thunderous shout, Deus vult, God wills it. The response is overwhelming, far beyond anything Alexios could have ever imagined or wanted. He had asked for a scalpel and was about to be handed a chainsaw. The movement, now known as the First Crusade, takes on a life of its own. It is not a single army, but a chaotic, sprawling mass of humanity. There are the great lords and their knights, but there are also thousands of peasants, women and children, swept up in the religious ecstasy. A disorganized vanguard, known as the People's Crusade, sets off first, led by a charismatic preacher named Peter the Hermit. They are undisciplined, unprepared, and they cut a swath of destruction through the Byzantine lands they are supposedly there to help, pillaging as they go. Alexios, watching this first wave of saviors arrive, must have felt a cold knot of dread in his stomach. Historians still debate whether Alexios was a brilliant manipulator who got more than he bargained for, or a desperate man whose plea was tragically misunderstood and hijacked for another purpose. Either way, the forces he has unleashed are now beyond his control. The great lords of the West and their armies have arrived. You are now standing outside the Theodosian walls, the same walls that have seen off Huns, Arabs, and Bulgars. But the force encamped before you now is not, technically, an enemy. They are allies, brothers in Christ, come to help save the East. At least, that is the theory. The reality you witness is far more complicated and fraught with tension. The sheer scale of the Crusader armies is stunning. Tens of thousands of them, a city of tents and banners, have materialized at the gates of the richest city in Christendom. They are loud, boisterous, and utterly alien to the sophisticated, orderly world of Constantinople. You walk through their camp, and the cultural clash is palpable. The Crusaders, mostly Franks and Normans, are feudal warriors. Their society is built on personal oaths, martial prowess, and a direct, often blunt, code of honor. They look at the Byzantines and see a world of bewildering complexity. They see the emperor not as a warrior king, but as a kind of priest-emperor, surrounded by bowing eunuchs and whispering officials. They are baffled by the intricate bureaucracy, the subtle diplomacy, the sheer ancient wealth of the city. They view the Byzantines as devious, effeminate, and untrustworthy, calling them Greeks with a tone of contempt. An obscure curiosity of this encounter is the Westerner's shock at the prevalence of forks, which were common among the Byzantine elite, but were seen in the West as a bizarre and unmanly affectation. They ate with knives and their hands, not with little two-pronged implements. From the Byzantine perspective, the situation is equally alarming. You sit in on the emperor's council meetings, and you hear the deep suspicion in their voices. They refer to the Crusaders as Latins or Celts, and they view them as uncouth, violent, and dangerously unpredictable. They are a barbarian horde, a blunt instrument that must be carefully managed and aimed before it shatters in their hand. They are shocked by the Crusaders' lack of discipline and their constant, squabbling internal rivalries. Most importantly, they are deeply suspicious of their motives. Alexios had asked for help reclaiming imperial territory, but the Crusaders, fired by the Pope's call, have their eyes fixed on a different prize, Jerusalem. And some of their leaders, like the ambitious Norman prince Bohemond of Taranto, a man who had previously fought against the empire, clearly harbor ambitions of carving out their own kingdoms in the east. Alexios, the master diplomat, handles this delicate situation with a genius that borders on sorcery. He receives the Crusader leaders, one by one, in the magnificent Blosheny Palace. You watch the spectacle as a burly Frankish count, accustomed to rough-hewn wooden halls, is ushered into a throne room designed to awe and intimidate. The emperor is seated on the throne of Solomon, a marvel of engineering flanked by golden lions that roar and birds that sing, all powered by hidden mechanics. The throne itself can be raised high into the air, leaving the visitor literally looking up to the emperor. Alexios showers them with gifts, feasts, and flattery, but he also makes a firm demand. Before he will grant them passage across the Bosphorus, each leader must swear an oath of fealty to him. They must promise to return any formerly Byzantine lands they conquer from the Turks. The Crusaders chafe at this swearing fealty to a Greek is a bitter pill to swallow. One famously boorish count even plops himself down on the emperor's throne, a shocking breach of protocol. Historians still debate the legal and moral validity of these oaths, sworn under a degree of duress, but Alexios succeeds in getting most of them to agree. It is a fragile contract, a gentleman's agreement between men who fundamentally do not see each other as gentlemen. With the oaths sworn, Alexios quickly ferries the massive armies across the strait into Asia Minor, breathing a sigh of relief as the dangerous, chaotic camp outside his walls finally disappears. He has successfully pointed the weapon at the enemy, but he has not diffused it. A century passes, a century of uneasy alliances and simmering resentment. The First Crusade was a qualified success for Byzantium. It pushed back the Turks and allowed Alexios' successors to reconquer a significant portion of Western Anatolia. But the creation of the Crusader states, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, and others, introduced a new, unstable element into the region. These Latin enclaves were a permanent source of friction, their relationship with the empire swinging wildly between cooperation and outright hostility. You feel the trust between East and West eroding with each passing decade, each broken promise, each misunderstanding. The memory of the oaths sworn to Alexios has faded, replaced by a deep-seated suspicion. The flashpoint arrives in the year 1204, and its origins are, so often in Byzantine history, a toxic brew of ambition and family politics. The reigning emperor has been deposed and blinded by his own brother. The deposed emperor's son, another Alexios, escapes to the west and makes a desperate, foolish plea. He promises a coalition of crusaders who have gathered in Venice to launch what will become the Fourth Crusade. An outrageous sum of money, military aid for their planned invasion of Egypt, and, most shockingly, the submission of the Orthodox Church to the authority of the Pope, if they will sail to Constantinople and restore him and his father to the throne. The leaders of the Crusade, hopelessly in debt to the Venetians for the fleet they have built, see this as a golden opportunity. The Doge of Venice, the cunning and ancient Enrico Dandolo, who was nearly 100 years old and blind, has his own scores to settle with the Byzantines. He enthusiastically supports the diversion. You stand on the sea walls of Constantinople as the Crusader fleet arrives in the Golden Horn. This is not a friendly visit. It is an invasion. The city, complacent after centuries of security, is ill-prepared. The fleet is the largest ever seen in these waters, and after a fierce assault, the Crusaders breach the walls. The usurper emperor flees, and the young Alexios and his blinded father are placed on the throne. The Crusaders have fulfilled their part of the bargain, but the bargain was built on a fantasy. You watch as the young emperor, now Alexios IV, tries to make good on his promises. The imperial treasury is empty. The citizens of Constantinople, fiercely proud of their Orthodox faith, are horrified and enraged by the promise to submit to Rome. Anti-Latin riots break out. Alexios IV tries to raise the money by melting down sacred icons and church treasures, an act of sacrilege that turns his own people against him. The situation spirals out of control. The young emperor, hated by his people and unable to pay his allies, is murdered in a palace coup. A new emperor is put on the throne, one who immediately repudiates the deal with the Crusaders, for the Crusaders camped outside the walls. This is the final betrayal. They are broke, frustrated, and now they have a pretext for what many of them wanted all along. They decide to take their payment by force. In April of 1204, they launch a second all-out assault on the city. This time, they succeed. What follows is not a conquest. It is a 3-day orgy of destruction that shocks the known world. You are a helpless witness to the horror. The Crusaders, warriors of the cross, run amok. They murder indiscriminately, men, women, and children. They loot not just the palaces, but the churches. They smash priceless ancient statues for scrap metal. You see knights drinking wine from sacred chalices in the Hagia Sophia, while a prostitute sits on the patriarch's throne, singing obscene songs. The great library of Constantinople is put to the torch. Centuries of accumulated art, literature, and knowledge turn to ash. Historians still debate whether this was a spontaneous explosion of greed and violence or a calculated act of cultural destruction, but the result was the same. The city that had been the repository of classical civilization, the shield of Christendom for 900 years, was systematically violated and dismembered by its supposed saviors. The heart of the Orthodox world had been shattered, not by a Muslim army, but by fellow Christians. The smoke has cleared over the violated city, but the soul of the empire is in exile. Constantinople is no longer the capital of the Roman Empire. It is the seat of a new, foreign Latin empire. A fragile feudal state carved up by Venetian merchants and Frankish knights. The city is a shadow, its treasures carted off to the west, its great palaces falling into disrepair. But the Byzantine spirit is not extinguished. It has scattered, taking root in the unconquered corners of the old empire. You journey with the refugees, the courtiers, aristocrats, and scholars who manage to escape the slaughter. Several successor states spring up, each claiming to be the legitimate government in exile, the true heir of the Roman legacy. There is a state in Epirus, in western Greece, and another on the southern coast of the Black Sea, the Empire of Trebizond. But the heart of the resistance, the place where the dream of return burns brightest, is the city of Nicaea. This is the same city where Constantine held the first great council of the Church, nearly 1,000 years ago. Now, it has become the temporary capital, a beacon of hope in a shattered world. You walk its streets and feel a quiet, determined energy. It is here that a brilliant dynasty, the Lascarids, establishes a new court. They are not just warlords fighting a guerrilla war. They are statesmen, painstakingly recreating the institutions of the Byzantine state in miniature. You see the imperial bureaucracy being re-established, a new patriarch being appointed to maintain the continuity of the Orthodox Church, and a new, disciplined army being forged. The emperors in Nicaea have a two-front war to fight. To the west, they face the Latins in Constantinople and the other Greek claimants in Epirus. To the east, they must manage a delicate relationship with the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. The irony is profound. The Byzantines are now allied with the very Turkish power their ancestors fought so hard against at Manzikert, united by a common enemy in the Latin Crusaders. The Nicaean emperors are masters of diplomacy. They make strategic alliances, they arrange dynastic marriages, and they patiently, methodically build up their strength. They know a direct assault on the massive walls of Constantinople is impossible. They must play the long game, waiting for the Latin Empire to weaken, to rot from within. The cultural life of the empire also finds a new home in Nicaea. Scholars and artists who fled the capital re-establish schools and workshops. They are driven by a sense of urgency, a mission to preserve the Hellenic and Orthodox heritage that was so brutally attacked. You sit in on lectures where students study Homer and Plato, their classical education now imbued with a sense of patriotic duty. This period of exile fosters a new, more intense form of identity. Before, they were Romaio, Romans. Now, cut off from the heart of the old universal empire, they begin to emphasize their Greekness, their Hellenic identity, more strongly than ever before. Historians still debate the extent to which this shift was a fundamental change in self-perception, or simply a change in emphasis. But the seeds of a new, more nationalistic identity are being sown. The focus of every prayer, every treaty, every military campaign is the return. Ipoli, the city, as they call Constantinople, is more than a strategic objective. It is a sacred promise, a paradise lost that must be regained. For over half a century, an entire generation is born and raised in exile, their lives dedicated to a single, all-consuming dream. The dream of one day marching back through the Golden Gate and seeing the dome of the Hagia Sophia rise once more against the sky. The long, patient work of rebuilding has begun. The dream, nurtured for over half a century in exile, is finally realized. But it happens not with the roar of a climactic battle, but with a whisper, a stroke of incredible luck. The year is 1261. A small Byzantine reconnaissance force, led by a general named Alexios Strategopoulos, is scouting near Constantinople. On a whim, they interrogate some local farmers, who tell them something astonishing. The main Latin garrison and the Venetian fleet are away, conducting a raid on a distant island. The city is virtually undefended. Seizing the moment, the general's men find an unguarded passage through the ancient walls and slip inside under the cover of darkness. They overwhelm the few remaining guards, set fires to create panic, and by dawn, the city is theirs. The last Latin emperor, Baldwin II, is woken by the commotion, and in a scene of almost comical panic, he flees the city on a Venetian fishing boat, clutching the imperial regalia. A few weeks later, the true emperor, Michael Octavo Palaiologos, makes his formal entry. You are there, lining the ancient ceremonial avenue, the mazy, but this is not a triumphant military parade in the style of Justinian or Basil II. The emperor enters the city on foot. He is not wearing armor or jeweled silks, but the simple robes of a penitent. As he passes through the Golden Gate, the traditional entrance for returning victors, he weeps. And as you follow his procession, you understand why. The city he has inherited is a ghost. The stories of its former glory now seem like cruel jokes. You walk through the Forum of Constantine, and you see weeds pushing up between the cracked marble flagstones. Entire neighborhoods are abandoned, their houses little more than burnt-out shells. their roofs collapsed. The population, once close to 500,000, has dwindled to perhaps 50,000 souls, rattling around inside the vast, empty spaces. The silence is the loudest sound, a profound emptiness where the vibrant hum of a metropolis should be. You follow the emperor to the Hagia Sophia. For 60 years, it has served as a Latin cathedral. The air is thick with the scent of unfamiliar incense, the mosaics covered or altered. Michael presides over a solemn ceremony to reconsecrate the great church, to wash away the Latin stain and restore the Orthodox liturgy. The structure itself is still magnificent, its great dome still soaring to the heavens, but it feels like a person who has endured a long and terrible trauma. The true scale of the ruin becomes apparent when you visit the Great Palace, the sprawling complex that was once the administrative and ceremonial heart of the empire. It is so vast, so plundered, and so dilapidated that it is now completely uninhabitable. Michael and his successors will abandon it, moving their court to the much smaller, more defensible Bloshany Palace in the city's northwest corner. It is a telling symbol of their reduced circumstances. The city is haunted by the ghosts of what has been stolen. You walk through the ruins of the Hippodrome. The famous 4 bronze horses that once stood above the imperial box are gone. You know they now stand looking down on the Piazza San Marco in Venice, a permanent reminder of the city's humiliation. The priceless collection of ancient statues that once lined the avenues has been melted down for coin. The empire has its head back, but its body is still weak and withered. Despite the poverty, a brief, final flowering of culture begins, what some call the Paleologan Renaissance. Artists create new mosaics and frescoes of incredible emotional depth and beauty. Scholars once again pore over the classics, driven by a new urgency to preserve their Hellenic heritage. Historians still debate whether this was a genuine cultural rebirth or simply the last, beautiful glow of a dying ember. But as you walk the lonely, magnificent streets, it feels as though the empire is a skeleton wearing a crown, a ghost in an imperial palace, forever looking back at a glory it can never reclaim. The brief, flickering candle of the Paleologan Renaissance cannot hold back the encroaching darkness. The fundamental problem of the restored empire is that it is a head without a body. The wealth and manpower of Anatolia are gone forever, and the remaining territories in the Balkans and Greece are a fragile patchwork. You are no longer in a city haunted by the ghosts of the past, but one haunted by the demons of the present. The demons of ambition and paranoia that fester within the ruling family itself. The greatest threat to the empire is not the Turk or the Serb, but the man wearing purple in the next room. The dynasty that recaptured the city is now poised to tear it apart. You see the old emperor, Andronikos II Palaiologos, a man of learning and piety, but indecisive and overwhelmed by the crises of his long reign. And then you see his grandson, the dashing, charismatic, and reckless Andronikos III. The young Andronikos is the center of a circle of young, dissolute aristocrats, and his lifestyle is a constant source of scandal. The tragic flashpoint is intensely personal, a story worthy of a Greek tragedy. In a fit of jealous rage, the young Andronikos orders his retainers to ambush a suspected rival for his mistress's affections. But in a case of mistaken identity in the dark, they accidentally attack and kill his own brother. Their father, Constantine, dies from the profound grief of this loss. The old emperor, Andronikos II, heartbroken and furious, disinherits his grandson. This family tragedy becomes the spark for a full-blown civil war. You watch as the empire becomes a chessboard for foreign mercenaries. The young Andronikos, backed by other ambitious nobles, raises an army. The old emperor must raise one in defense. But there are no vast reserves of native-born troops anymore. So both sides turn to the only option left, hiring outsiders. They hire Serbs. They hire Bulgarians. Most catastrophically, they hire Turks. You see Ottoman warriors, the very people conquering their last holdings in Anatolia, being paid with imperial gold to fight on Byzantine soil against other Byzantines. The mercenaries have no loyalty. They fight for the highest bidder, switch sides when it suits them, and when payment is late, they simply plunder the countryside. The very farmlands that feed the capital are stripped bare, not by foreign invaders, but by armies paid for by the emperor and his grandson. This becomes a destructive, repeating cycle. The grandson eventually wins, forcing the old emperor to abdicate and become a monk. But a generation later, the cycle repeats itself with even more devastating consequences. After Andronikos III's death, a power struggle erupts between his young son's regency, led by his mother, and the boy's brilliant but overly ambitious guardian, John Kantakasinos. Another civil war tears the empire apart. This time, the devastation is even worse. In the empire's second city, Thessaloniki, things go even further. The central government's authority collapses completely, and a radical faction known as the Zealots effectively establishes a self-governing commune, a civil war within the civil war. Historians still debate whether these civil wars were the primary cause of the empire's fall, or merely a symptom of a deeper, irreversible decline that had begun much earlier. But the consequences are undeniable. And while the Byzantines are busy tearing at each other's throats, you see the banners of a new power rising across the water. The Ottoman Turks, under their methodical and patient sultans, are not just raiding anymore, they are conquering. They watch the Byzantine civil wars with keen interest, often participating as mercenaries to weaken both sides. While the Paleologoi fight over the scraps of a dying empire, the Ottomans conquer the great city of Bursa and make it their capital. They take Nicaea, the city of the Creed. They cross into Europe at the invitation of a Byzantine faction, and they never leave. The empire is tearing itself apart, piece by bloody piece, a family squabble, playing out on an imperial scale while the executioner sharpens his axe just outside the door. The bitter taste of ash from the civil wars lingers in the air. The family squabbles have ceased, not because of reconciliation, but because there is almost nothing left to fight over. The empire is a tattered flag fluttering over a single flagpole. You can feel the shift in the air, a profound change in the strategic reality. The Ottomans are no longer just a threat, they are the new landlords of the neighborhood, and the Byzantine Empire is the last, stubborn tenant refusing eviction. The city that was once the heart of a world-spanning empire is now an island, a Christian island in a vast and rising Turkish sea. You stand on the Theodosian walls and look east, across the Bosphorus. That land is lost. You look west, into Thrace. That land is also lost. The Ottoman Sultan no longer rules from a dusty Anatolian town. He rules from Adrianople, a city deep in Europe, a city much closer to Constantinople than many of the empire's own former territories. The sea is not just lapping at the shores, it has flooded the entire continent around you. The process was slow, methodical, and suffocating. You recall the stories of how the Ottomans first crossed into Europe at Gallipoli, a foothold that became a beachhead that became a province. Then came the steady, relentless conquest of the Balkans, city by city, fortress by fortress. The great Serbian and Bulgarian kingdoms that once challenged Byzantium have been crushed and vassalized. The Ottomans are now the masters of the entire hinterland. The claustrophobia is a physical sensation. All land routes to the west are cut. The only connection to the rest of Christendom is by sea, a perilous journey controlled by the often unreliable Italian maritime republics of Venice and Genoa. Supplies, news, visitors, all must come by ship, turning the once mighty capital into a glorified port, a coastal enclave entirely dependent on the whims of the waves and foreign sailors. From the high towers of the walls, you can see the smoke rising from Ottoman villages. Their patrols ride with impunity right up to the city's ancient aqueducts. The world outside the walls is a foreign country. An absurd and melancholy curiosity of this period is what you see inside the walls. The vast city, designed for a population of 500,000, is now so empty that large swathes of it have been turned over to agriculture. You see vegetable patches and even small fields of wheat growing where bustling marketplaces and aristocratic villas once stood. The city is literally